Hello, I'm really glad you're here. On this channel, I share simple, quiet stories about life, love, and the little feelings we all go through. If that sounds like something you enjoy, don't forget to subscribe. Every subscriber gives me a little more encouragement to keep telling these stories. Now, let's begin today's story. Chandler and Moore occupied the entire 37th floor of the Willis Tower, a place where the glass mirrored the sky, and every wall whispered power. Below, Chicago sprawled like a giant scale model, inside a boardroom lit with surgical LED precision. Men in ties quietly moved billions with a few taps on a keyboard. Ethan Harper sat at the head of the table. His silver-grey tie was perfectly centered. White shirt, crisply pressed, his face sharp. Unreadable, looked like it had just walked off the cover of a finance magazine. In front of him, a presentation slide outlining the Hoshida Capital deal, an old-school Japanese investment group with deep pockets and deeper caution. Around him, associates murmured, fingers gliding over iPads, jotting notes in haste. No one said it out loud, but everyone knew this deal could make Ethan a partner 3 years ahead of schedule. And for Ethan, the only thing worth waking up for was winning.
Ethan, your report is flawless, but there's one issue, and it's not on your Excel sheet.
Mr. Caldwell, chairman of the board, silver hair, jaw like a blade, voice slow, deliberate, each word landing like a verdict.
I'm listening.
You know what the Japanese value besides strategy and profit, don't you?
Trust, long-term stability, personal honor.
Exactly. And to trust you, they need to see that you commit not just to the project, but to life itself.
Ethan tilted his head slightly. He saw where this was going.
Let me be blunt. They're uneasy doing business with someone who has no roots, no family, no one to come home to. No one beside you means you could disappear any time. They don't like that.
Silence swept over the room. The air grew heavy. Like the morning mist over Lake Michigan, Sandra married. 2 kids offered Ethan a glance laced with sympathy and caution. Greg, freshly wed, subtly checked his wedding band.
I'm not saying get married, but at the very least, let them see a woman by your side. A relationship that says you can hold on to something that lasts.
You want me to fake a relationship?
I want you to seem trustworthy. How you do it is your business. We meet them in 3 weeks. Can you handle it?
I'll find a way.
Good. They need to see a man ready for commitment, not just a money-printing machine.
The meeting ended without fanfare. Chairs pushed back, laptops closed, jackets buttoned. Post-meeting coffee invites floated through the air like soft waves.
Ethan, if you need, I know a few single women stable, no drama.
I'll manage, but thanks, Sandra.
He stepped into the hallway. His leather shoes clicked rhythmically against the marble floor. Abstract paintings lined the walls cold. Geometric, reflecting harsh white light. The only light in Ethan's mind was focus. He entered the elevator alone. The doors closed. The mirrored walls threw his image back at him, tidy, calm, empty. But deep inside, something vibrated. A thin string just snapped. He pulled out his phone, opened his personal inbox. At the bottom of the list, an email from 3 years ago. Subject, goodbye. You don't have a heart. Ethan. Or if you do, it's somewhere no one can reach. I can't stay lost in that maze. He closed the email, pocketed the phone. He used to think love was a luxury for people not busy enough. But now, he needed it, or at least the illusion of it, if he wanted to rise. Back in his office, he shut the door, drew the blinds. Afternoon sun fell across the walnut desk. He opened his laptop. Incognito mode. Typed Chicago social partner hire, discreet, temporary, contract-based, dozens of results, dating services, apps, a few semi-pro casting sites, but on line 8, one caught his eye. Don't fake it alone, hire someone who can act for two. Verite Connections. He clicked, minimalist site, black and white, no ads, no pop-ups. A booking form appeared. Who do you need, for how long, and for what purpose? Ethan typed role girlfriend, duration 6 months, purpose escort to high-level social events, requirements intelligent, quick thinking, professional demeanor, no emotional ties. He hit send. 17 minutes later, the first reply landed in his inbox. Recommended candidate Ava Brooks, stage actress, 29 experience, 6 years in improv, media events, fast adapter, additional unmarried, no legal entanglements, lives in Uptown. Ethan opened her profile. Tupao, a woman with tousled brown hair, eyes gleaming with sharp wit. Her smile wasn't forced, like she found the world amusing in its absurdity. He read her personal blurb. I don't believe in perfect performances, but I do know how to make it look real, at least for the camera. Ethan sat up, opened his calendar, typed, meet in person, blue bottle coffee, 10:00 a.m. tomorrow. Sent. The door had opened. The game had begun. But Ethan didn't know this time, and the performance wouldn't stay on stage, but it would live in every intertwined finger, every glance that stopped being just part of a contract. Ava Brooks woke to the sound of traffic echoing up from North Broadway, where teal-blue buses hissed past the weathered brownstones like clockwork. Her third-floor apartment was small, but it had light, a rare luxury in the life of a Chicago stage actress. Like every morning, she woke up alone, pulled back the curtains, and stood quietly watching the city breathe. The scent of coffee drifted through the air from the auto-scheduled machine, while Lucy, her calico cat, leapt onto the windowsill and began her lazy grooming ritual. Ava sank into her worn-out sofa and picked up her phone. 90% spam toothpaste commercial castings, life insurance pitches, Target's end-of-season clearance alerts. But one email made her pause. Subject professional companion role, discreet casting inquiry. She frowned. The message inside was brief, polite, yet unmistakably clinical. A company was seeking a female performer to portray a social girlfriend for a male corporate client. Duration 6 months. All expenses covered. Absolute discretion required. No emotional involvement. The first meeting would be at a downtown cafe if she was interested. Respond within 24 hours. Ava sat still, fingers hovering above the screen. She'd played everything the jealous girlfriend in a winter skit. The runaway bride in an indie music video. The single mum in a laundromat commercial. But never something real. No cameras, no audience, just one man and one strange proposal. Logic hesitated, but something deeper said this might be a turning point, not in her acting career, but in her life. She cracked the window open. Cold air blew in from the lake, lifting her hair. October in Chicago had a way of reminding people of their mistakes. She thought of her mother, gone 4 years now, from lung cancer, leaving behind a wooden box with a few photographs and a handwritten note, "Live your own life, even if it looks nothing like anyone else's." Ava touched the edge of her collar, where her mother's plum-colored scarf still held the faint scent of lavender. Lucy hopped into her lap, nuzzling her hand as if nudging her toward a decision. Ava smiled faintly, then typed, "I'm interested. See you at Blue Bottle Coffee, 10:00 a.m. tomorrow, Ava." She hit send and didn't move. A strange mix of freedom and danger swelled in her chest. The next morning, Ava chose a simple yet polished outfit, a caramel sweater, high-waisted black trousers, low-cut ankle boots, hair neatly tied back. She wasn't trying to look like an actress, just like a woman who could make a man feel confident beside her. Yet, not easy to control. She arrived at Blue Bottle on time, picked a window seat, and ordered a cappuccino. At exactly 10 Belgique, the door opened. A man walked in tall, sharp, fluid in movement like he left no sound behind, a charcoal wool coat, white shirt, neatly cropped brown hair, eyes that seemed to rearrange a room just by existing in it. He scanned the cafe and landed on her. No surprise, no hesitation. He walked over and extended his hand and...
Ava Brooks.
And you must be the director of the strangest audition I've ever attended.
Ethan's lips curved slightly, not quite warm, but not cold either.
Ethan Harper, attorney. I figured I should lay everything out from the start.
I like men who don't dance around things.
He took a seat, set his leather briefcase beside him. Ava studied him. No ring, no cologne, just the faint scent of paperwork and coffee. His eyes, though neutral, carried the weariness of someone used to control and suddenly encountering something he couldn't predict.
I need a girlfriend. On paper, at cocktail events, in front of international clients. You don't need to love me. You don't need to come home with me. You just need to make people believe you want to be near me for 6 months, minimum.
So, I'd be playing a woman in love with you.
Not too much. Just enough to convince a group of Japanese investors that I'm the kind of man who can commit.
And why me?
Your file says you're good, composed, not prone to emotional overreaction. And you were the only applicant who didn't send a bikini photo.
Ava laughed. Really laughed. Ethan looked at her for the first time as if this wasn't an interview, but something different. She didn't fit in his world, too unscripted, too unpredictable.
How much are we talking?
$10,000 a month, travel covered, wardrobe, fixed stipend. You can decline any event outside the agreed description. Everything's in the contract.
And what do you promise?
I won't invade your personal space. I won't ask for anything beyond the terms. I won't touch you unless there's an audience.
Ava was quiet, slowly turning her coffee cup.
And if someone finds out?
Then I lose everything, not you.
Silence. Outside, golden leaves swirled past the window, inside. Two strangers sat across a wooden table like a story, waiting to begin its first scene.
There's one thing you forgot to ask.
What's that?
If I'm playing the role, who's writing the script?
You are.
Ava nodded slowly. She'd never been the lead in her own life's play, but maybe now was the time.
Then I accept.
Ethan didn't smile, but he nodded. And in that nod, something unspoken was signed, not in ink, but in a glance between two people who had no idea what was coming. They stood, shook hands like business partners closing a deal. But only Ava realized no one had taught her how to act in a story that might just turn out real. Ethan held the door. She stepped out. The wind caught the edge of her sweater. Sunlight filtered through the awning, turning the street gold. On her way home, Ava couldn't recall how many traffic lights she passed. only that her heartbeat didn't follow any rhythm she'd ever rehearsed. In her uptown apartment, Lucy basked in a sunbeam by the window. Ava walked in, tossed her keys on the table, leaned back against the wall. She closed her eyes. One roll, 6 months. A stranger? A paycheck that could change her life. But the only thing she couldn't account for was feeling. Friday night. The Chandler and Moore building shimmered like a crystal monolith in the heart of Chicago. The main lobby was dressed in full Art Deco elegance, red wine in crystal glasses, Swiss watches on manicured wrists, and practiced smiles concealing corporate calculations. It was the firm's annual gala, a celebration of financial success, and an unspoken battleground of glances, whispers, and wardrobe choices. Ethan Harper arrived early, as always, navy suit, charcoal tie, every step calibrated like the hardwood floor had been built to match his stride. Colleagues greeted him with handshakes of perfect grip and timing. Everything was just right, except for one thing. He was standing alone. He glanced at his watch. 7:43 p.m. Ava had said 7:45. Ethan wasn't worried, he didn't know why, but he trusted she'd show not because of the money, but because she was the kind of woman who respected a role, even a temporary one. And then she walked in. Ava Brooks wore a figure-skimming olive satin dress, her hair in a low bun, lips painted the color of Merlot. She didn't enter the room she arrived, as if the lighting adjusted itself to follow her steps. Men turned to look. Women tilted their heads, measuring. Ethan just stood still, wineglass in hand, eyes locked on every movement, graceful, sure, unhurried.
Hope I'm not late.
You're right on time to become the center of attention.
She smiled, no pretense, no performance, just presence. He offered his hand. She placed hers in his like they'd done it 100 times before. He led her inside, greeted a few people, introduced her by name, Ava Brooks, and simply added, "My girlfriend." At first, Ava didn't speak much for y'all. She nodded, smiled, just enough, listened more. But then when a British partner named Daniel asked what she did in Chicago, she began the act.
I'm a stage actress, mostly classical theatre. But lately, I've been experimenting with contemporary pieces.
Fascinating. And what's Ethan like off the company stage?
Him stubborn, a perfectionist, but always in control, like life's a chessboard, and he knows his next 3 moves at all times.
The group laughed. Ethan tilted his head, lips twitching, unclear if amused or caught off guard. She steered the conversation like a dancer across a stage, never missing a beat. When someone asked how they met, she replied,
A small cafe in Uptown. I was reading The Glass Menagerie, and he asked, "Do you think Amanda really understands her children? I had to buy him an espresso just to finish the debate."
Ethan exhaled lightly. No one had told her he used to read Tennessee Williams in college. She had either guessed or noticed more than most. After an hour, Ava wasn't Ethan's +1 anymore. She was part of him. When she stepped away for a drink, the women in the circle leaned in.
She's stunning, and she seems different from the women you usually date.
Honestly, and she is...
Where'd you find her? She sounds like she stepped out of a Sorkin script.
Ethan just shrugged. He didn't know what to say. Because, truthfully, he didn't know. She wasn't like anyone he'd met, not because she was more beautiful, or clever, or poised, but because with her, he felt less fake, even when everything between them was a performance. Near the end of the night, Ethan and Ava stepped onto the terrace. The city unfolded beneath them like a wordless jazz tune, soft lights. Gentle wind brushing her dress.
Did I do okay?
You don't need to ask.
But I want to know. Did it feel real?
Scarily. More than I expected.
She gave a quiet laugh, then turned to the skyline. After a pause, she said,
You don't have to wear that stoic face all the time. Sometimes, people believe you more if they see a real smile.
The problem is, I'm not sure I remember what a real smile looks like anymore.
Then watch me. When you need to fake one, just look at me. I'll remind you.
Ethan looked at her. Wind moved through her hair, and for the first time in years, he realized he wasn't in control of the situation. And strangely, he didn't want to be. As the party wound down, Ava touched his arm, her gaze soft.
See you at Act 2, Mr. Harper.
She left first, no need for him to walk her out. Ethan remained, alone in a thinning crowd. The wine in his glass had gone cold, but his chest hadn't. Something in there was warming, like someone had lit a small light, flickering but real. That night, back in her uptown apartment, Ava kicked off her heels, sat on the floor, turned on the bedside lamp. Lucy leapt into her lap, nudging her shoulder like, "So, how was tonight's performance?" She smiled faintly, stroking the cat. She didn't know exactly what she'd signed up for, but one thing was clearer than any contract she'd ever seen. Ethan Harper might think he hired a woman to play the role of a girlfriend, but what he didn't know was Ava Brooks never played halfway. The party ended close to 11, but in Ethan Harper's mind, everything felt like it was just beginning. He stood just outside the doors of Chandler and Moore, eyes following Ava Brooks as she disappeared past a line of idle taxis. Her dress moved gently in the night breeze like a whispered farewell. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. The curtain had fallen. The applause was done. And she, like any seasoned performer, exited on cue. Ethan didn't get in his car right away. He stood still, buttoning his jacket, eyes still fixed on the spot where she had vanished. His chest rose and fell slowly, like he needed more time to understand what had just unfolded. He'd been to hundreds of parties, shaken thousands of hands, endured endless empty conversations. But tonight, amid golden lights and half-finished wine, Ava had made everything different. On the drive home, Ethan left the radio off. No music. The Mercedes glided through quiet streets, street lights reflecting on the windshield like fragments of memory. At every red light, he saw her again, those quick, intelligent eyes, that perfectly measured smile, and the way she had said, "If you need to fake it, just look at me." He had looked, and that was the problem. Back at his penthouse, Ethan didn't turn on the lights. He let the city's glow pour in through the tall windows. He walked straight to the kitchen, poured himself a glass of scotch. No ice, no rush. He drank slowly, letting the warmth slide down his throat like it might drown out something unfamiliar rising inside him, a feeling he'd never allowed to stay. At his desk, he opened his laptop. The screen blinked on instantly. He opened his inbox. Nothing from Ava, not surprising. She understood the rules. No one said you had to text after a successful performance, but Ethan still opened a blank email. He typed, then deleted. Typed again. Deleted, finally. He wrote a single line, so honest, it startled him.
Thank you for tonight. You were incredible. Maybe too incredible.
He stared at it for a long time, didn't hit send, didn't even fill in the address. Just sat there as if the words didn't need to be read by her. They just needed to be said. Once. Meanwhile, in Uptown, Ava stepped into her small apartment, kicked off her shoes, dropped her bag on the sofa. Lucy padded over, rubbing against her leg. Ava sat on the floor, removed her earrings, let down her hair, and leaned back against the wall. Her makeup was still perfectly intact, but her gaze drifted to the ceiling like replaying the night's entire act in her mind. She knew she'd done well. She saw it in the way people looked at her. She felt it in Ethan's hand on her back, in his glance when he thought no one noticed. But what surprised her most was that she hadn't been acting the whole time. There were moments between the laughter and the wine when she'd actually felt something. A new heartbeat. Off script, Ava stepped out onto the balcony. Cold wind caught her hair. The city wasn't asleep yet. Cars whispered by in the distance. And below, the lights shimmered like a stage that never closed. She sent Ethan a message, just one line.
If you want to rehearse for the strict mother-in-law scene tomorrow, I can come by before 1.
No immediate reply. She expected that. Ethan wasn't a text right back kind of man. He'd read it, think it through, and if he answered, it would be because he wanted to, not out of courtesy. She didn't send anything else. She put her phone away, brewed a mug of ginger tea, and turned on soft jazz. She sat there, back against the chair. Lucy curled at her feet and wondered 6 months, could she stay in character for that long? When her heart, once a silent observer, was now sitting front row. Across town, Ethan left his desk and entered the bedroom. He didn't undress right away. Instead, he sat on the edge of the bed, scotch still in hand. The wall across from him was lined with books, law, finance, strategy, no novels, no poetry. But tonight, his mind echoed with a monologue no one had written down, and the only voice he heard was Ava's. He picked up his phone, opened the unsent draft one last time, read it again, then deleted it. He didn't need to keep the words, but he'd remember what it felt like to write them. Before sleeping, Ethan set his alarm as usual, but this time he added one more, 10:30 a.m., an hour before his first call. And in his mind, a quiet voice stirred. If she really shows up tomorrow, I'll have the coffee ready. Ethan Harper never imagined bringing a woman home to meet his parents under circumstances like this. It wasn't that he'd never been in love, it was that he used to believe love didn't need introductions. It existed quietly, like the way people know morning has come without needing an alarm. But this time was different. This was a performance, and every performance needed a stage. That grey, chilly Sunday in Oak Park became the backdrop for the debut of his girlfriend, Ava Brooks. She sat beside him in the black sedan, wearing a soft beige sweater, a plum scarf, and makeup so light she might as well have gone barefaced. Ethan didn't speak much on the way there, not because he was nervous, but because he was preparing to re-enter a space he hadn't felt at home in for years.
How often do you visit your parents?
Whenever my mom calls 3 times in 1 week, or threatens to cut me from the will.
Seriously?
No, but she might, over a wine stain on the tablecloth.
Ava laughed. and that laugh made Ethan glance over, just for a second, but enough to notice she wasn't nervous. Or at least, she hid it better than he did. The Harper family home was a classic 2-story. Stone front house with a perfectly manicured front lawn, so perfect, it felt cold as they stepped out of the car. The door opened almost instantly, like Mrs. Harper had been standing behind the curtain, waiting.
Ethan, you do remember the way home.
She wore a cream cashmere sweater, hair in a neat bun, a string of pearls around her neck. Every movement was precise, nothing extra, nothing missing. Her eyes swept to Ava quick, sharp, before offering a smile.
And you must be...
Ava Brooks. Ma'am, I've brought a smile and a promise not to spill anything on the table linens.
Mrs. Harper paused, then laughed, really laughed. Ethan watched his mother, possibly for the first time in years, lower her guard.
Come in, let's not freeze to death out here over clever banter.
Inside was a world apart from Ethan's sleek apartment. Everything hinted at ritual leather armchairs, a marble fireplace, a grandfather clock ticking in rhythm. Ava didn't hide her curiosity. She glanced over family photos, one showing 18-year-old Ethan beside a stern-looking man. Mr. Harper, Ethan's father, sat in the reading room, glasses on, holding a print newspaper. He nodded as Ethan walked in, then eyed Ava.
And you are?
Ava. And I'm hired to make Ethan seem more likable. But not hired in a shady way. Hired in a contractually agreed-upon way.
Ethan choked slightly. Ava winked at Mr. Harper, who looked surprised and quietly amused. Lunch was served on a gleaming walnut table with white porcelain dishes rimmed in silver. Grilled salmon, rocket salad, homemade bread. Ava sat across from Ethan. To Mrs. Harper's left. Every question was met with a story short, grounded, and never too much.
Acting. That's a real job.
Oh, very real. I pay rent, insurance, and for costumes when the director's budget fails.
Have I seen anything you've done?
If you like Tennessee Williams, and plays with 3 people, 1 yellow bulb, and a real cigarette, you might have, without realizing it.
Mrs. Harper laughed again for the 3rd time, and Ethan didn't say much. He just watched Ava for the first time, not to assess, but to remember. After lunch, Mrs. Harper invited Ava into the kitchen to see her Baccarat glassware collection. Ethan stood outside on the porch with his father. Cold air, bare maple branches above them.
You take after your mother, reserved, but no one else puts people at ease quite like she does.
I'm not sure I'm putting anyone at ease today.
Then maybe it's a good sign. First time you're unsure about something.
In the kitchen, Ava gently touched a crystal glass.
You know, Ethan brought a girl here once, 7 years ago.
And he's been afraid of glassware ever since.
No, but he hasn't called anyone his girlfriend to my face since.
Why do you think that is?
Because he's afraid of having to protect something he can't control.
And if it's worth protecting...
Then I hope this time he doesn't run.
On the drive back, Ava watched the trees roll past her window. Ethan drove in silence.
Your mum's sharp. I like her.
You made her laugh 3 times in an hour. That's a record.
You think she bought it?
That you're my girlfriend.
No, that I wasn't just acting.
Ethan didn't answer, but after a moment he said,
Thank you for today. You were amazing. Maybe too amazing.
Ava turned to him. She didn't reply. But the smile she gave him wasn't part of any role. Ethan Harper wasn't the kind of man who found himself in small Lakeview theaters on a Friday night in early November. Places like that didn't appear in his schedule or in any quarterly financial report. But tonight, he sat in the fourth row from the back of a modest black box theater with fewer than 100 seats, surrounded by students, retirees, and lovers of art, all waiting for the woman who had been playing his girlfriend for the past 6 weeks. Only tonight, Ethan wasn't the one in the spotlight. The Mercury Theatre had no bells or announcements. When the lights dimmed, silence spread like a secret code among those breathing in unison. Ethan sat upright, fingers interlaced, eyes fixed on a bare stage, no curtain, just an open space, a wooden table, a hanging light bulb, and a woman. Ava Brooks sat beneath it. Her hair was tied up high, the light casting a soft streak across her cheek. She didn't look at the audience. She didn't need to. The moment she spoke, the room forgot how to breathe.
I've sat here how many nights now, no one counts. No one asks. Every cup of cold tea is a memory no one saved. Every glance that passed my shoulder was a sentence I never got to hear.
Ethan was no longer in his seat. He'd been drawn into her world, one without contracts, without rules, without pretending. Every word, every motion she made hit something inside him, something that hadn't been touched in years. The play was a 90-minute monologue, no scene changes, no co-stars, just Ava. Alone. But Ethan never once felt she was alone on that stage. She owned that space like she was born to be there. Every blink, every breath, every gesture had rhythm and reason. At one point, in the middle, Ava turned her back to the audience and stayed silent for nearly 10 seconds. No one coughed, no one shifted. Then she turned around, her voice coarse, her eyes unfocused.
If I stop speaking, will anyone still listen? If I stop trying, will someone still say, "You are enough," even if no one claps?
Ethan felt heat behind his eyes. Not because of the line, but because he realized Ava wasn't acting. She was clearing out a room inside her heart and inviting everyone in. When it ended, the audience stood. Applause thundered. Ava bowed. Briefly. Her smile not proud, just grateful. She slipped off stage without needing the light to follow. Ethan remained seated long after the lights came up. He walked into the lobby, stood near a wall covered in old posters. He hadn't meant to speak to her. He didn't want to break the spell of what he'd just witnessed. But then Ava appeared simple, in a grey wool coat, hair down, water bottle in hand. She saw him.
Where did you sit?
Fourth row from the back, next to a girl taking non-stop notes.
Online critic. I dated one once. No one tells a story worse than someone who thinks they know every character.
You didn't need a narrator tonight.
Ava paused, tilted her head slightly.
You came alone.
I didn't know anyone who'd fit beside me.
She smiled softly and stepped closer, her voice dropping just a little.
What did you see on that stage?
You.
Me as Ethan Harper's girlfriend or me?
For the first time, I didn't need to tell the difference.
A cold gust swept through the lobby. Lifting the hem of her coat, Ava pulled her collar closer. Ethan reached for his phone, then put it back in his pocket.
You want to eat something pasta, a burger, something hot and salty.
I'd rather be quiet for a bit. But if you want to walk a few laps around the lake nearby, I wouldn't say no.
They stepped into the street. No hand-holding, no shoulders brushing, but their steps fell into rhythm. On the nearly empty sidewalk, Ava spoke.
I used to think the stage was the only place I had control. I'd walk in, know what to say, what to do, where the audience would sit. But tonight, I wasn't so sure. I saw someone in the crowd I couldn't perform for.
That someone was me.
I'm not sure. But if it was, then you reminded me who I was before I learned how to write scripts.
Ethan stopped beneath an old maple tree, golden leaves thick at the base. He turned to face her.
You know, a contract can spell out everything: time, location, conditions, but no clause stops a person from feeling something real. That's the part that scares me.
So what are you afraid of?
That one day, you'll stop pretending, and I still won't know how to be real.
Ava didn't reply right away. She looked at him for a long time, like she was rereading a chapter in a book no one had finished.
When you're ready, you'll know. And if I'm still here, maybe we'll throw out the contract. Write a new one by hand. No signatures. No laws. Just eyes.
Ethan nodded slowly. And for the first time since it all began, he stepped closer, not to hold her, not to kiss her, just to stand beside her close enough to hear her breathe. Ethan Harper didn't like skiing. He hated the layers of clothing, hated the way people screamed as they barreled down a slope of blinding white, hated the scraping sound of skis against wet snow. But this weekend, his firm was hosting a winter retreat for the executive team, and he had to show up for cultural alignment. So he went. With Ava Brooks, Ava had never been to Lake Geneva. On the drive, she cracked the window just enough to let in the cold. Her hand wrapped around a cup of hot cocoa, the smell of cinnamon and milk filling the car. She didn't ask Ethan about the schedule, didn't care who else would be there. She only asked, "Do we have a fireplace?" When Ethan nodded, she smiled. "Then I'm bringing a script and my thickest socks." They arrived early Saturday afternoon as the snowfall picked up. Their cabin, set apart from the rest of the group, was a courtesy extended to executives. Cozy, wood-paneled, with 2 bedrooms, an open kitchen, and wide windows facing the snowy hills. Ethan found it convenient. Ava found it dangerously romantic. They skipped the team-building ski session with the others. Ethan claimed a headache. Ava didn't explain. She shed her coat, curled under a blanket on the sofa, opened an old play, and began to read like they were in the middle of a rainy afternoon inside an old library. Outside, the wind howled. The sky was so grey it was impossible to tell dusk from night. At 6, a message buzzed in from resort management. Due to the snowstorm, all access roads are temporarily closed. Please remain in your cabins. Further updates to come. Ethan read it, then glanced over at Ava sitting cross-legged. Her face turned toward the firelight.
We're snowed in.
Could be worse. As long as there's chocolate and the person I'm stuck with doesn't talk too much.
Ethan set his phone on the table. Ava looked at him for a moment, then smiled faintly.
Do you think we've gone beyond what the contract outlines?
Do you want the honest answer or the in-character one?
Both. Let's see how close they are.
Honestly, yes, in character. We're building the image of a deep, credible relationship enough to survive next quarter's review.
So I have 3 more months to learn how to camp in the snow.
Ethan didn't answer. Instead, he poured more wine into her glass. A bottle of Merlot had been pre-stocked in the cabin, likely for couples in love or at least pretending to be. Ava said nothing else. She leaned back, legs stretched out. The red and white striped socks on her feet, looking like something out of a Christmas ad. After a simple dinner, quick pasta. Chilled greens, they sat in silence before the fire. No music, no phones, just the crackle of burning wood and the slow warmth of wine on their lips.
Did you ever imagine yourself with someone like this in a cabin, in the snow with no reason to be?
I didn't think I needed to. Everything in my life had purpose, even relationships.
And if something has no purpose?
I'm not sure I know how to keep it.
Ava nodded, her gaze returning to the fire. Ethan felt lighter. His words hadn't been measured. They were real. And she didn't react like someone waiting for her next line. Night fell completely. Snow piled higher. Ava tugged the blanket tighter, her hair loose down her shoulders. She spoke into the wind.
I'm not taking the bed. I toss and turn. I'd probably break someone's neck.
The sofa's fine for you and your book. I'll take the other bed.
She didn't argue, just nodded. Then, as she stood, she paused in front of him.
Ethan?
Yeah.
Thanks for bringing me. Whatever the reason, I feel like I can breathe out here.
Ethan looked at her, something flickering in his eyes without a name. Then he said, softly,
I'm not sure it's about the reason anymore.
Ava smiled, then walked away. She disappeared behind the bedroom door, leaving Ethan alone with the firelight and a night that might just change something he wouldn't be able to control come morning. The next morning, everything was still white. The wind had calmed, but snow blanketed the trails, rooftops, and the windshield of the car outside. Ethan woke to pale light filtering through the bedroom windows, casting a soft glow on the wooden floor. The silence was so complete. He felt like the cabin had been cut off from the rest of the world. He got out of bed and walked barefoot into the living room. The fireplace had gone cold, and the faint light from a lamp cast long shadows on the wooden wall. But Ava was still curled up on the sofa, under the wool blanket, hair tousled, her forehead damp with sweat. Ethan stepped closer. She didn't stir. Her breathing was labored, her face pale. He leaned in, placed a hand on her forehead. Burning, unmistakably hot.
Ava, can you hear me?
Her eyes fluttered open, lips dry, her voice barely there.
I'm fine. Just tired.
You're burning up. You're shivering.
She tried to sit up, but her head tilted. Ethan caught her, steadying her shoulders.
Don't. Let me get you some water.
He rushed to the kitchen, found a bottle, and brought it back. Ava sipped slowly, her hand still clenching the blanket. Ethan rummaged through the cabin's medicine cabinet. No fever reducers, just old ibuprofen and a few vitamin C tablets. He gave her one and sat on the edge of the couch, eyes fixed on her, unmoving.
I'm sorry. I ruined your ski retreat.
You think I actually came here for skiing?
Ava let out a faint laugh, but it faded quickly. Her eyes dimmed, then shut. Ethan tucked the blanket tighter around her, brushed her hair back gently, and stood. He opened his laptop, no signal. Checked his phone, nothing. The cabin was completely offline. He spent the whole morning by her side, pressing cool towels to her forehead, checking her temperature with his hand, mixing honey ginger water like his mother used to make, for the first time in his life. Ethan didn't need spreadsheets, phones, or data. He just needed Ava to open her eyes and smile the way she always did. Around noon, Ava stirred, her breathing steadier, her voice clearer.
You made ginger tea.
The contract didn't say I had to, but I couldn't just stand there and do nothing.
So, you worked pro bono today.
Maybe for the first time. I'm glad I didn't get paid.
Ava took his hand, said nothing more. Ethan didn't pull away. His hand stayed in hers, warm and a little shaky. The room was quiet. Only the soft whistle of wind outside and her returning breath filled the space. All afternoon, Ava slept. Ethan didn't leave the cabin. He read from the play she had brought. Occasionally jotting down lines on sticky notes, Maggie knows she's alone, but still stands there. No one hugs someone who's acting, only when they go quiet. Truth doesn't need many words, just a long enough look. That evening, she woke again. Better. The fever had broken. Ethan made thin rice porridge from what little they had left in the pantry. Ava sat up, still weak, but her eyes were brighter.
I must look like some cheap soap opera patient, right?
No, you look like a real person, one I've never seen before.
So, what did you see today?
Someone who wasn't performing, someone who needed care, and I wanted to be the one to give it.
Ava looked at him for a long time, as if the words had come before she was ready for them. But she didn't pull away. She didn't speak. She just nodded. That night, Ethan didn't sleep in his room. He laid a mat beside the couch, reading, dozing off, waking again. Ava tossed in her sleep, her breath quickening, brows furrowed. Ethan reached out, gently placed his hand over hers, whispered softly.
You're okay, I'm right here.
She gripped his hand, didn't let go. And in that moment, the contract, the line that had once defined them faded. There was only Ava, with a pulse that was real, and Ethan with a heart no longer in its original place. Rumors began the way they always did in Chicago's business elite, with a photo and a question that didn't need an answer. The photo appeared in an online business bulletin under the headline, "From Boardroom to Snow Cabin is CEO Ethan Harper crossing ethical lines in it." Ethan and Ava stood outside a snow-dusted log cabin. She was laughing. He was looking at her, not like a man playing a role. Ethan heard it from Claire, his corporate communications advisor, on a Monday morning, just as he stepped into his office.
It's everywhere now. Twitter, LinkedIn, some trashy blogs, and a finance podcast.
Has anyone mentioned her name yet?
Not exactly. They're calling her the mysterious woman, but someone already tracked down her last stage play. It might just be a matter of time.
Ethan nodded, saying nothing. He stared out the glass window, the sky still streaked with winter morning mist. He should have felt irritated, furious, or at the very least, out of control. But the only thought in his mind was Ava's going to hate this. Ava found out through a text from an old castmate. Just 5 words. Page 7. Your face. Not a poster. She froze, opened her phone. The photo. Ethan's name. The suggestive comments, so the name Blue Bottle came up again. Well, some speculated PR stunt indie film or a billionaire's romantic distraction. That afternoon, Ava went to Ethan's office. No call, no appointment. She walked into the glass conference room where he was talking with 2 board members. Pale grey suit, black turtleneck, hair tied back. No makeup, but the look in her eyes made the room fall silent.
I need to speak with you. Alone.
Ethan nodded. The other 2 quietly stood and left. When the door shut, Ava didn't sit.
Seems like my role just stepped off stage.
I don't know who took the photo. I had phones banned during the retreat.
Doesn't matter who took it. What matters is why people find it worth sharing.
Ethan stayed quiet. Ava walked toward the window.
I agreed to this role because it had structure, boundaries. I knew what was real and what was just performance. But when that line gets crossed and not by me, I no longer know who I'm supposed to be.
You think I wanted this to happen?
I think maybe you forgot I'm still a real person.
Her words cut, not wide, but deep.
I'll take care of it. PR will clean it up.
And then what?
She turned to face him, no space left between them.
The contract ends and everything goes back to normal. What are you going to tell your investors? That you were pretending to love for growth metrics?
I'll tell them. Sometimes things go beyond the plan, and I don't want to go back.
Ava stood still. Ethan didn't look away. No defense, no strategy, just one thing: honesty.
I don't even know what to believe anymore. Ethan, I'm not a headline. I'm not a scripted campaign.
You think that's how I see you?
No, but that's how the world sees me now.
She walked out. The door closed behind her. Ethan didn't move. His hand tightened into a fist, then released. Everything he once had control over, now slipping through his fingers, and the one person he couldn't afford to lose was walking away. That night, Ava returned to her uptown apartment. She left all the lights off, save for the soft yellow glow in the kitchen. She opened an old script, tried to read, but the words blurred. She felt like she'd played the lover and the betrayed without knowing when the scene had changed. Ethan didn't text that night, didn't call, didn't send a thing. But the next morning, when Ava woke up, there was an envelope at her door, no name. Inside was a copy of their original contract, every clause slashed through in red ink, and a single handwritten note: I don't need paper to stay. I just need you not to ask me to go. This stage wasn't the Mercury. It was smaller, older, black-painted wooden seats, lighting the color of faded memories like a past no one bothered to preserve. But Ava Brooks stood there anyway, in that cramped space. On the opening night of her first performance since the media storm. The play was a new piece between seasons, about a woman returning to her childhood home after too many years away, trying to reclaim memories erased by time and rumors. No one knew whether the script had been chosen before or after the scandal. But for those sitting in the dark that night, everyone understood Ava was playing herself. Ethan Harper didn't sit close to the stage. He chose a seat by the last aisle, not to hide, but so she wouldn't see him, not out of fear of her gaze, but because he didn't want to disturb the world she was trying to rebuild. When the lights came up, Ava stepped into view in a simple dress, hair loose, no heavy makeup. She didn't smile. She didn't bow. She began with a quiet monologue.
They said I forgot, that I left and didn't look back, that when I came home, I owed them an explanation. But who explains anything when no one listens with ears only, with words already written for them?
Every word she spoke landed in Ethan's chest, not because she was talking about him, but because he had never seen her this honest, not in front of him, but in front of herself. In the third scene, Ava stepped to the center of the stage, touching a plain white wall, the symbol of the old house. She laid her hand on it, as if searching for something lost.
Someone once told me, if you leave, take my heart with you. But when I came back, my hands were empty, and he was no longer there.
Ethan lowered his head. Someone beside him whispered, "She's too real." He wanted to turn and say, "She's not acting." But he didn't. Because maybe he was finally learning the value of silence, of when the curtain fell, the audience rose, applause erupted. Ava stood center stage, eyes red, but no tears. She bowed slowly. She didn't wave, didn't smile, just held still, and that was enough for everyone to understand the performance was over. But the truth remained. Ethan left his seat before the house lights came up. He circled through the back hallway, knowing the old roots of these small theaters, the dressing room corridors, the plastic cups of water, the places where people spoke with glances more than words. Ava sat alone on a bench backstage. She wore a thick coat, collar turned up, staring at the ceiling. She heard footsteps, didn't turn.
You didn't have to come.
I know.
What did you think would happen if I knew you were in the audience?
You'd perform differently, and I didn't want that.
She turned toward him for the first time in days. Their eyes met. No blame, no surprise. Just the look of someone who's walked through a storm and finds someone still waiting at the place where it all began.
I'm not sure I want to return to that old role. Ethan.
I don't want any role at all anymore.
Then what are we?
He stepped closer, slowly, no rush, then sat beside her. His hand rested on hers, not gripping, not pressing, just touching.
Two people who've spent too long pretending, and now just want to be real for a while, even if no one claps.
Ava nodded, then rested her head on his shoulder for the first time, beneath the faded yellow backstage lights. There was no stage, no audience, just two people in a store beginning again. The emergency meeting was scheduled for 7:30 a.m. on the 48th floor of the Harper & Comey Tower, a long glass-walled room, walnut table, leather chairs aligned like chess pieces waiting for the players to arrive. Outside, the grey December mist. Inside, stairs colder than the weather. Ethan walked in on the dot, portfolio in hand, tie tightened just enough. Across from him sat 6 people, 3 board members, 2 major investors, and 1 legal advisor. No greetings, only controlled gazes like he had just spilled red wine across $1 million tablecloth.
Ethan, thanks for coming. Let's get right to it.
Ethan nodded. No one needed coffee, no one needed icebreakers. The issue was clear and as cold as the frost on the windows.
You're aware of the situation. The photo went viral. Speculation hasn't stopped. We've received reports suggesting your personal relationship with an actress is affecting brand value and shareholder confidence.
It's being handled. Media channels are being realigned.
But not fast enough. 3 partners have delayed contract signings, pending internal clarification from us.
They won't say it aloud, but they're all asking the same thing. Is Ethan letting his emotions interfere with his role as CEO?
Ethan kept his posture straight. He knew this moment would come. But when it finally did, it looked nothing like any crisis simulation he'd prepared for.
I've never allowed emotions to dictate company decisions. All this quarter's numbers are above forecast.
Media doesn't just measure numbers, they measure image. And your image right now is a CEO entangled in a romance that compromises business ethics.
Ethan paused, then asked,
What are you suggesting?
What they're suggesting is we need to eliminate any perceived conflict of interest. Your relationship with Miss Peel Ava Brooks must be redefined either publicly or terminated.
To be blunt, you can remain CEO, but you cannot do that while maintaining a personal relationship that undermines our ethical framework.
No one expected Ethan to answer immediately. They handed him a single-page document, 3 options. Publicly clarify that the relationship was a PR campaign and issue an apology. End all contact with Ava. If neither is acceptable, resign. Ethan looked at the paper, folded it, set it on the table.
I'll give you my answer by this afternoon.
They nodded. He walked out. No further words. But Whitmore's final look was unmistakable. Choose correctly. And everything continues. Choose wrong. And the door will close for good. Back in his office, the room felt smaller than usual. Everything he'd built, every overtime hour, every flawless report, every sharp investment call was now being weighed against a woman who held no shares in his company. Claire stepped in. She didn't need to ask what happened. She just asked,
Want me to clear your afternoon,
Clear everything,
including the legal strategy meeting?
especially that one.
Ethan drove to Lake Michigan, stopped at Jackson Park. The wind was fierce, the water grey, waves crashing against concrete like they were venting someone else's fury. He sat in the car for a long time, then pulled out his phone, called Ava.
Where are you?
At the theatre. Fixing props for the weekend show.
Can I come?
What are you doing?
Choosing between you and everything I've ever thought was stable.
Ava didn't respond right away. Then she said,
I don't need you to choose. I just need you not to deny it.
What if I resign?
I'll be waiting in the wings.
Ethan ended the call, closed his eyes, and for the first time in his life, he felt himself about to make a decision that wouldn't generate profit, but might just save the part of him he was close to losing. Ethan Harper stepped out of the 48th floor elevator, his overcoat already removed, no briefcase, no documents, just a single. Crisp folder in hand, his resignation letter, freshly signed in ink. The board was already waiting in the closed conference room. The atmosphere was the same sterile coldness. No one made eye contact for long. No greetings. But this time, Ethan didn't feel the weight of it. Everything was so clear now. He had nothing left to fear losing.
I'm here to formally resign from my position as CEO of Harper & Company, effective immediately.
No one interrupted. No one objected, because they all knew Ethan had made his decision. And if he stayed, he'd betray the very integrity they once admired in him.
I'm stepping away from the role you all once praised. I've been Harper & Cody's Ethan for almost a decade, but I no longer want to live as a character.
He placed the folder on the table, stood tall, turned, and walked away. No glances back. The glass door closed behind him. Everything that used to matter was now just a distant echo. At that same moment, across the city, Ava Brooks was adjusting the ribbon on her costume backstage at a small theater in Old Town. It was the final performance of Bon. Between seasons, a modest play in a theatre that seated just 80. But to her, it was the biggest stage in years. Not because of the press, not because of prestige, but because today. She didn't know if Ethan was still in her audience or already out of her life for good. When the stage lights rose, Ava stepped out. The glare stung her eyes, but she still searched the crowd, an involuntary habit she couldn't unlearn. She didn't see Ethan, just blurs of figures. Still, she performed. Because the stage doesn't wait for feelings. And the role tonight was herself.
They say I forgot the past, but no one ever asked if the past forgot me. I came back not to apologize, but to ask if one day you walk away. Who am I then?
Ethan sat in the last row, silent, eyes fixed on her. The spotlight never reached him, but every word she spoke reached him. When the curtain fell, applause started in scattered waves. Then all at once, Ava bowed, and for a fleeting second, she thought, that's it. Another show, another role, and the one person she hoped had come didn't rise from his seat. But as she stepped through the wings, still in costume, not even sipping water, he was there. No flowers, no speech, just Ethan with eyes that no longer held any distance. Ava froze, not in shock, but because his presence frightened her with truths she thought she'd already made peace with.
You didn't have to come.
I know, but I didn't want you thinking. I stayed because of a contract.
She exhaled hard, no tears, but her eyes were wet.
Are you still CEO?
No, and I don't want to be anything else. If it means being away from you.
She didn't answer, just stepped closer, and quietly rested her head on his shoulder. Nothing else was said, no applause, no spotlight, but everything left between them was real. The first Monday after Ethan resigned was a cold morning, no alarm clock, no red-flagged emails, no meetings, no pending reports. He woke up in Ava's apartment, soft sunlight leaking through white curtains. The room was silent. Not the silence of emptiness, but the kind that comes when something new is beginning, like a song waiting for its first lyric. Ava was making coffee in the kitchen, hair tied up, wearing an old sweater, a dish towel looped around her wrist. She heard Ethan's footsteps, but didn't turn. She just asked,
Did you sleep okay?
Feels strange. No reason to wake up. For anything.
Then start learning to sleep in for yourself, not because no one's giving you deadlines.
Ethan sat down and watched her pour coffee into 2 white mugs. The aroma filled the small space. And suddenly, his heart slowed, not from losing something, but from discovering something he never believed was real. They had breakfast together, just toast, almond butter, a few apples, and an open magazine, nothing fancy, no long conversation. Yet it felt like the whole world fit on that tiny wooden table. Ava looked at him for a long while, then asked,
Are you okay? Leaving it all behind?
It's not easy, but I don't regret it.
Part of me thought, maybe you'd choose the other path, the safer one.
I thought that too, but then I realized I was tired of playing the role of the right man, and never asking if I was happy.
Ava nodded, her eyes softened. Then she stood up and took a small box from the bookshelf. Placing it in front of him,
This is my copy of the contract. I kept it after I walked out of your office that first time.
Ethan looked at the box, didn't touch it.
I was going to keep it as the most ridiculous memento of my life. But now, I think we should burn it. Not out of anger, but because we don't need it anymore.
They carried the box to the backyard. An old charcoal grill was lit with a few sheets of newspaper. Ava opened the box, pulled out the papers one by one, and handed them to Ethan. Her hands didn't tremble, no hesitation, as if she already knew to begin a real chapter. You have to let the scripted one go properly. Ethan looked at each page clauses he'd written himself. Dates, legal bindings, notes about public appearances, all now just paper, and he was no longer the man who needed it to feel protected. They set the papers aflame. The fire glowed orange, silent, but the light it gave lit up the little yard for a fleeting moment. Then they stood in silence, watching the ashes rise, no words, none needed. In the days that followed, life slowed down. Ethan learned to make coffee without measuring by grams. Ava began rehearsing a one-woman show she wrote just for herself with no plans to submit it anywhere. They went grocery shopping, argued over yogurt flavors, then laughed. They watched movies. Ethan dozed off halfway. Ava mentally noted every scene he missed. No big moments, no headlines. But maybe it was the first time they truly knew what it meant to live together. One afternoon, Ava was arranging flowers. Ethan came up behind her, placed his hand on her waist.
I used to think love had to come with proof, a plan, a strategy, but you taught me. Sometimes it only takes a rainless afternoon and someone who doesn't need to try to be loved.
Ava looked up, her eyes clear.
I didn't teach anything. I just didn't want to act anymore.
Ethan kissed her forehead, then held her from behind. They stood there in a small kitchen, no music, no director. But something about it felt exactly like what they'd both been searching for all along. On a Thursday morning, just as sunlight cut through the window panes, Ethan's phone rang. He wasn't used to that sound anymore. It had been nearly a month since he'd taken a call from the old world. But the name flashing on the screen made him freeze. Martin Kemp, investment partner from San Francisco. Ethan picked up. Martin's voice was clear, fast, and unapologetic.
Heard you left Harper. Loud exit, but bold.
Sometimes bold just means having no better option.
I've got a project. EdTech. National scale potential. Needs a strategic lead for the investment phase. Not as CEO, just advisory. A few months. But we really need your mind.
I'm not exactly in fight mode anymore.
I didn't call Ethan the CEO. I called Ethan the guy who once said, "Value lies where no one's looking."
Ethan didn't respond. Martin didn't push. After a moment, Ethan said he'd think about it. Martin sent the documents. Ethan set his phone down. The room returned to its familiar stillness, but this time it didn't feel as peaceful. Meanwhile, at the Mercury Theatre, Ava received a white envelope, no return name, just a faint embossed logo, Theatre of America, New York. Inside was a script nightingale, lead roll Grace, a woman who loses everything in war, surviving on memory and unspoken love. Along with it, a note: auditions are done. We selected you based on your monologue in between seasons. 3-month contract. Starts next month. Ava couldn't breathe as she folded the letter. This was it, a real stage. The dream she'd chased since she was 20. But New York wasn't Chicago, and 3 months wasn't a short trip. That night, Ethan and Ava had dinner by candlelight, not for romance, but because the kitchen light still hadn't been replaced. Both were quieter than usual. Then, at the same time, they each placed a hand on the table.
I got an offer, investment project, advisory role, a few months.
I got an offer, lead role. 3 months in New York.
They looked at each other. No surprise, they both knew, eventually. The things they left behind would knock on the door. What they didn't know was whether to open it or let their hands stay still on the handle.
If I go, things will change.
If you don't, you'll regret it. And I don't want to be the reason you carry regret alongside love.
What about you?
I'm wondering if it's possible to return to a world I left not just because of you, but because of me.
They didn't solve anything that night, but something passed between them in a glance and understanding, a quiet surrender of control that made neither of them feel afraid. That night, Ava couldn't sleep. She lay staring at the ceiling. In her mind, a line from Grace echoed.
If I leave, let me leave my song. If I stay, let me be the silence of a final note no one dares to sing.
Ethan sat on the balcony. In his lap was the file Martin had sent. The cover was open. He didn't read, just stared into the black cityscape. For the first time, he wasn't asking, what's right? He was asking, can love last without a shared schedule? The first morning of the new month began with a soft sound, the quiet roll of suitcase wheels over wooden floors. Not the frantic rush of someone late for a flight. Just the sound of someone leaving, while part of their heart stayed behind. Ava stood in front of the mirror, adjusting her hair without using spray. She hated holding things in place when she knew she was changing. Ethan made coffee, pouring milk by hand, not measuring. Every small thing felt routine but carried a silence too delicate to name. They'd talked the night before, under the kitchen light. No arguments, no objections, just a mutual understanding. Spoken simply,
I'm going.
And I'll stay.
Not because we don't love enough.
But because if we don't go, we won't be real enough.
Ava didn't sleep much that night. She wrote a letter by hand, not for romance, but because some things should be written slowly. Ethan didn't read it right away. He tucked it into the pocket of a shirt hanging behind the chair, where he knew he'd find it when he needed it most. Ethan drove Ava to the airport. They didn't play music. Chicago was still the same cold, traffic-heavy, streets slick from morning rain. But inside the car, it was warm and quiet, each lost in thought. When they reached Terminal 4, Ethan pulled up to the curb. Ava turned toward him. She held his hand firmly.
What if 3 months pass and we're not the same?
Then we start again, as who we've become, not who we were.
Ava smiled, but she didn't kiss him. She didn't want to seal emotions with a rushed gesture. She just looked into his eyes. For a long time, as if memorizing the color to use later. As her compass. She stepped out. Didn't look back. Ethan didn't call after her. But as the glass doors slid shut, he stayed there, hands on the wheel, eyes fixed on nothing, just holding himself back from following. On the plane, Ava took a window seat. As it lifted off, she opened the letter Ethan had left that morning, a blank page with only one line. Shine brightly because I'll be waiting even when the lights go out. Ethan returned to the apartment, now quieter. The chair where Ava used to sit still held the shape of her coat. The coffee cup in the kitchen was still warm. He didn't clean up right away, not because he didn't want to, but because sometimes loving someone doesn't mean keeping them beside you every day. It means holding on to the belief even when they're no longer in view. Winter in New York was its own entity, not just cold, but sharp, not just crowded, but breathing fast. Ava Brooks lived in a short-term rental on 73rd Street, less than 10 minutes walk from the theater. Every morning, she made coffee with a hand filter, turned on the local radio, and memorized new lines. She was becoming Grace, the woman who lost her husband in the war but lit a window lamp every night, believing one day he'd come home. Ava didn't act Grace. She became Grace. But every time the stage lights went dark, she remembered the one she was waiting for was in Chicago, on the other side of the country. Ethan Harper began taking Martin's calls about the EdTech project. Twice a week, he advised a young startup team, mainly on growth strategy. They admired him, but he was no longer the man who thrived pitching on stages. He missed the small kitchen, missed Ava's laughter mid-monologue. They didn't call every day. No, did you eat or did you sleep texts. Not because they didn't care, but because both understood real love isn't measured by frequency, but by silent presence. Every week, Ava sent Ethan a postcard, sometimes a photo of the theater, sometimes a sunset from Central Park. Never lengthy, just a line, like stage lights were amber today. Thought of you. Or Grace had a line tonight I know Ethan would have edited. Ethan kept them all in a wooden box, tucked in his bedside drawer. Ethan never sent anything back. But every Tuesday morning, Ava received a blank email from him, subject line, only Tuesday. Still here. Nothing more. But that was all she needed to know he was still keeping his promise. One night, after the 20th performance, Ava was backstage removing her makeup when a castmate texted her, "There was a man outside during your final scene, didn't come in, didn't ask for a ticket, but stood there for a long time." Ava ran to the doors, no one there, just wind, but she knew. Without asking, Ethan had come and chose to stay outside so he wouldn't disturb the role she was living. A week later, Ava sent Ethan a draft of a short play she was writing. In it, a line read, "Some people don't need to come inside your home. They just need to wait under the porch light because that's enough to know they still belong there." Ethan read it, didn't reply. But the next morning, he stopped by their old cafe Blue Bottle, bought 2 cups, kept one, set the other on an empty table by the window. He sat alone. No laptop, no notes. Just closed his eyes and imagined Ava in that worn coat walking in, smiling. That night, New York was colder than usual. Even though the calendar claimed it was early spring, the Broadway theater had been packed since 6 p.m., every seat filled with critics, admirers, and those who only knew Ava Brooks by whispered reputation. Tonight was the final performance of Nightingale, the play that had carried Ava from a small Chicago stage to the center of America's spotlight. Ava stood in the wings, dressed in Grace's ash-gray silk gown. She wasn't trembling, but her heart wasn't still. For the first time in dozens of performances, she couldn't recall her opening line. Not from fear, but because she knew stepping out tonight meant preparing to step away. The lights rose out. She stepped forward as if she'd never left the stage. The golden beam washed over her eyes, and her voice rang out, not as a performance, but as if she were speaking to herself.
They say time fades everything, but to me, time only sharpens what applause once blurred.
The audience was silent, no coughs, no phones. Not out of politeness, but because they all knew they were witnessing something real. When the play ended, Ava stood center stage and bowed deeply. She didn't cry, but her eyes were red. The audience rose to their feet, clapping. Some called her name. Some wiped tears. Others just sat because they didn't know what else to do. After curtain call, director Lydia Clay, a middle-aged woman with steady hands, called Ava into a private room. Inside were 2 producers and a rep from the New York Theatre Guild.
Ava, you've exceeded every expectation. The company wants you to stay. We'd like to extend Nightingale for at least 6 more months.
Pay doubles. And there's an invite to audition for a new HBO series.
Ava sat quietly. She nodded, thanked them, but didn't answer. Lydia didn't press, just smiled softly.
No rush. We'll hold the slot for a week. But if you say no, we'll assume it's because of a man.
I'm not leaving for anyone. That if I leave, it's because I need to know who I am without the stage lights.
Back at her apartment, Ava removed her costume and hung the grey dress in the closet. She looked around the rented sofa, the tiny dining table, the unread bookshelf, a space once dreamed of. But now she realized nowhere feels like home if your soul has nowhere to rest. She made tea, sat at the table, pulled out the stack of postcards Ethan had sent one each week. No images, just the same line. Still here. She smiled. Not because she missed him, but because she missed herself, the woman who once believed love didn't require proximity, only presence in the heart. Ava wrote a letter to Lydia, not long, but enough. Thank you for believing in me. But my greatest role wasn't Grace. It was Ava, the one learning to live without chasing applause. The next morning, she packed her things, told no one, posted nothing, just sent a single message. Ava, text, I'll be at the cafe at 10. If you're not there, I'll wait until it closes. Ethan read the message at 7:15 a.m. He didn't reply. But by 9:30, he was seated at their usual blue bottle coffee table. The one by the window. 2 cappuccinos on the table, one hot, one cooling. When Ava walked in at exactly 10:00, he didn't look up. But she knew he'd already seen her. She sat down. No smile. No words.
How long do you want to sit?
As long as it takes. Because I'm not going anywhere anymore.
And for the first time, no contracts, no spotlights, no one watching. They began again, not like before, not like a movie, but real. Spring came late to Chicago. The branches outside their apartment balcony had only just begun to bud green when Ava officially moved in with Ethan. No one said, "Let's live together." No plans were drawn. It just happened one day. A few dresses appeared in the closet, a lemon oil bottle in the kitchen, and lavender body wash in the bathroom. Ethan rearranged his consulting schedule, working from home 3 days a week. Ava accepted a teaching position intro to acting for first-year students at a community arts school. They had separate routines, but woke at the same time, shared breakfast at the same table, and fell asleep under the same bedside lamp. On the first morning, Ava stood in the kitchen wearing Ethan's shirt, her hair in a bun, barefoot. She held a skillet but couldn't find the sea salt, the glass jar with the wooden lid she was sure she'd placed in the right spot. Ethan walked in and saw the scattered scene.
Are you cooking or starring in The Girl Who Lost Her Spices?
I'm exploring the culinary culture of a man who's lived alone too long.
He laughed, walked over, opened the cabinet, handed her the salt from the second shelf, right where he'd kept it for 4 years. She looked at him, exhaled, kissed his cheek.
Maybe. I should learn not to change everything at once.
And I'll learn to hide the salt where you can find it faster.
It was their first clash over something small, but not the last. A week later, they argued. Ethan forgot to turn off the coffee machine. Ava hated the beep it made when overheated. She raised her voice. He said nothing. She stepped out to the balcony. He did the dishes. 10 minutes later, he came out holding a cup of chamomile tea.
Not coffee, but it's hot and doesn't beep.
Ava smiled, took the tea, and didn't say sorry, but she placed her hand over his. And that was enough. They started a shared notebook, not some elaborate journal, just one entry a week, alternating, about something the other did that reminded them, I still want to stay. Ethan wrote first. She shattered a glass, then laughed and said, At least I didn't break you. And I felt myself melt like the glass itself. Ava wrote the week after, he folds napkins like a soldier folding a flag. But he also silently changed the light bulb before I even realized the living room was dim. They didn't read them right away, just left them there. For moments of anger, for when she felt lost, for when he felt old. One evening, they went grocery shopping. Ava insisted on buying a wooden rocking chair for reading. Ethan said the apartment had no space. She didn't back down, neither did he. In the end, they bought nothing. At home, silence. An hour later, Ethan opened his laptop, found foldable chair designs, and built one himself. Ava sat in it, said nothing, just leaned her head on his shoulder. On rainy days, they stayed in. Ethan read. Ava wrote short plays. They didn't mention Harper and Coney or Broadway. No one asked, what if you want to go back, or what if another offer comes? Because both knew this love wasn't about giving things up, but about choosing each other among infinite possibilities. One morning, Ava made the coffee first, placed it on the table, in Ethan's favorite mug. When he walked out, she brushed his hair gently and said,
I know this isn't forever, but I think I'm learning how to live without needing long promises.
If you're here this morning, that's long enough for me.
There was no wedding, no rings, but one afternoon, as they reorganized the closet, Ava said,
I think we should split this drawer, officially.
Ethan didn't ask questions, just stepped back so she could choose her side. And just like that, they didn't start love over again. They began living in it. Thank you for listening to the story. If you have any thoughts, feel free to share them in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. Once again, I'm really happy to have you here. Don't forget to subscribe so we can keep sharing more stories about life together. Take care and see you next time.